Hello and welcome to Global Shift, where we track the global transition away from the neoliberal world disorder towards a new emerging planetary order and help to unpack and make sense of the latest news and geopolitical events. Today I want to cover the British involvement in the Ukraine war and the nature of the British-American alliance that has bulldozed it over the heads of Europe's public. Two media events have recently hit the headlines that throw some light on aspects of this. There's first of all Seymour Hersh's report about the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipelines and ex-Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's revelations in a TV interview about his role in the Russia-Ukraine peace negotiations. For our full analysis of these issues, including sources, please read our latest article on globalshift.com, which you can find a link for in the video description below. First, Seymour Hersh's report of the 8th of February, which is based on a single anonymous source accusing the Biden administration of planning and executing the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. This took place on the 26th of September. Most interested observers would have concluded by now that America was involved. But Hersh provided colour for this grim picture. Apparently, the plan for this operation predated the start of the Ukraine war and used an obscure deep diving group from Panama City, Florida, trained in special underwater operations. This group would seek the help of the Norwegian Secret Service and Navy to plant C4 explosive charges covertly on the pipelines during the June 2022 NATO exercises in the Baltic. The charges would be made to explode 3 months later, damaging large parts of the Nord Stream 1 twin pipelines and a section of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and the explosion would be triggered by a sonar buoy dropped by a Norwegian Navy P-8 surveillance aircraft that will be flying a routine mission in the area, and all this to make it seem as if America wasn't involved. There are two commentaries that have come up of interest on this subject. The Moon of Alabama website, which follows military matters and Ukraine in granular fashion, pointed out that placing C4 charges around the very thick steel pipes with concrete casings that make up the Nord Stream pipeline would require digging them out of the seabed where they are placed and wrapping hundreds of kilos of explosive around them. This would require many teams of divers alternating to operate at depth with a lot of equipment, and would take weeks rather than days to accomplish. So the trouble here with the Hersh story is that this couldn't have happened covertly during those particular exercises mentioned, especially since the exercises themselves were tailed by Russian anti-submarine corvettes with hull-mounted sonar systems. Also, there is a video tracking footage. There's video tracking footage made available on YouTube by a channel called Werx that does show, in fact, a P-8 Poseidon aircraft over the area of this explosion at the time it occurred, except that the plane isn't Norwegian, or it doesn't seem to be Norwegian. It comes in straight from the United States, refuels over Poland, only to turn round to go back to the area where the explosion took place, south of Bornholm Island, drop its charges visibly. On the video you can see the movements of the plane dropping its charges, only for the plane to return straight back to the United States. The narrative on this video says that the movements over the plane were consistent with the launch of a Hawk anti-submarine torpedo, as is the footage that would be later made available of the damage actually done to the pipes. The video is available with all the timings in the article on the Global Shift website. The question arises in this context why it was that Russia blamed Britain after the explosion. It would appear that Russian intelligence picked up a message sent by Liz Truss to Tony Blinken immediately after the Nord Stream explosions, which said cryptically, just job done. The message would appear to be consistent, say, with British divers preparing the area, clearing it of craft, securing the airspace, placing signals for the torpedo attack, and reporting back after the event. So given all of this, the details of Hersh's account may be up for discussion, but what it makes clear, what the gist of the report altogether makes clear, is that recriminations are now taking place at the heart of the Biden administration. The source is very vocal about its views on the subject and states that the act it was a foolish act which set a very dangerous precedent for the Russians or other powers to copy. In addition to that, the report is very useful and has been reported with glee by the Chinese media, because it does make the ongoing Chinese project of portraying America at the United Nations as a madhouse and China as the sensible superpower much easier. We come to Naftali Bennett's interview, TV interview, which shows us that Bennett was actively involved in the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Again, the video of this TV interview is available on the globalshift.com website with various timings mentioned in the article so that people can find their way. President Erdogan of Turkey did host, importantly, Russian and Ukrainian negotiations in Istanbul, but Bennett actually shuttled between world leaders and had personal discussions with them and came very close to securing a peace because in his conversation with both Putin and Zelensky, he seemed to have obtained crucial concessions from both parties that made an agreement in principle possible. The video shows at a critical point how British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was the only world leader to stand squarely in the war camp. Macron and Scholz appeared not to want war. Even Biden appeared to Bennett, at least at the time, to want to see both sides of the question. So this brings us to the background as to Britain's position, Boris Johnson's decisions, and Britain's alliance with America. There are three aspects to Britain's role here, to the background for Britain's role. The first concerns the development in the United States of an anti-Russia policy in the first place, in the wake of the great financial crash. Why an anti-Russia policy? If Russia never really was a commercial threat to the US, even during the Cold War, at the time of the Soviet Union, but always a reliable supplier of essential resources to the world. After the great financial crash, 2008, we see the rise of China. We see it with the massive fiscal and monetary rescue package of 2009, that it employed to keep world growth going at the time of massive crisis. And we see also Hank Paulson's entreaties to the Chinese leadership not to sell its dollar assets in order to keep the financial system stable. At that point, China and the Hu Jintao regime, that was the government at the time, began a new, more assertive foreign policy. After Hu Jintao, when Xi Jinping came to power, he would institutionalize this foreign policy in something that would be called the Belt and Road Initiative, the creation of massive worldwide infrastructure that would direct trade to and from China throughout the world, the heart of which would actually run through Russia with an endpoint in all the European capitals. The question at that point became who would control Russia's enormous resources if that project was developed. The first pass trying to control Russian resources was made by the EU, pursuant to its 3rd of September 2009 Third Energy Package, in which the Russian government was asked to privatize its energy industry. The Western energy giants were all queuing up to buy Russian facilities. When Putin rejected the idea out of hand, the EU clearly lost control, and the US moved in. Targeting Putin became a priority as soon as Obama became president. By 2012, the manufactured Russiagate narrative demonizing Putin as the autocrat actually began, based on allegations of corruption against his regime made by an American businessman named Bill Browder, which resulted in the passing of the Magnitsky Act of 2012 by the US Congress, along with a batch of Russia sanctions, and this was followed by various diplomatic expulsions that Obama made. So we see Russiagate actually beginning quite early on, way before the events of the Trump election, which turbocharged all of that demonization of Russia and Russia disinformation. The second point concerns the turn to NATO by Britain after Brexit, which it used to launch a comeback in Europe. Before Brexit, the Cameron-Osborne government of 2015 had a policy of engagement with China that ignored the increasingly hard line the United States was taking. George Osborne went to Shanghai, to the Shanghai Stock Exchange, and made his famous speech where he wanted to link the London and Shanghai stock exchanges, and that was followed by Xi Jinping's state visit in October of the same year. All this was about was the City of London establishment, the impatience of the City of London establishment with the EU over the process of negotiation which was taking place about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, the Free Trade Agreement, which was supposed to be signed between the EU and the US. The TTIP and its mirror image in the Pacific, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, specifically excluded China and were Obama's responses to Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative. This phase would end with Brexit. Brexit was a strange event where British elite, which consisted of parts of the City of London establishment and the southern aristocratic class, allying ironically with Britain's poor in the north and in the coastal areas which had been disenfranchised by the neoliberal world disorder, allied to leave the EU in the vote for Brexit. After that vote, clearly the Obama administration was incensed. Cameron resigned. But in November, it was the turn of the Democratic establishment in the United States to feel the wrath of the disenfranchised from the neoliberal world disorder. Trump was elected and actually cancelled all of Obama's plans for free trade deals like the TTIP and the TPP. And the reality after that, the reality after Brexit, was that the United States would make its favourable relationship with Britain in the future conditional on turning the line with its policies, with its new, more aggressive policies towards China and Russia. The US thus would make Britain's choices binary, and Theresa May began the process of securitizing Britain's relationship with China, viewing the Eastern Giant as a threat rather than an opportunity. In respect of Russia, Britain saw an opportunity with the arming of Ukraine to reinvent itself and assert leadership in Europe through NATO. The third point concerns the alliance that will be formed in that context between the British and American establishment over the demonization of Russia and the use of the idea of Russian disinformation as a method of censorship in the West to defeat the rise of populist forces, of Trumpian forces, and of the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement. The article on globalshift.com goes into detail into the links between the great financial crash and the rising up of Trump and the MAGA crowd against the Democratic establishment. These events came as a shock, especially when Trump attacked NATO and attacked the assumption that lay at NATO's very foundation, namely that Russia was the enemy. It was then, in 2016, that Britain's intelligence services became central to the development of the Russiagate narrative with the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier, if one might remember, had a precursor in the dodgy dossier that Tony Blair produced in 2002 to justify his involvement in the Iraq war by claiming he had irrefutable evidence of weapons of mass destruction. As mentioned earlier, you can read the detailed analysis about all of this and all the subjects raised here and how they all come together in our latest article, for which you can find a link in the video description below. Or go straight to our website, globalshift.com. Please email me on info@globalshift.com with your constructive analyses and comments anytime. We are all here to learn. Thank you for listening.